In the sweltering heat of a Georgia plantation in 1845, where cotton fields stretched like endless white seas under a merciless sun, a young slave named Elijah toiled day after day. But one fateful evening, as shadows lengthened across the big house, the master's wife, elegant and lonely Eliza, whispered words that would shatter his world. "Come to my room tonight." Elijah's heart pounded with fear. What forbidden secrets lay behind her invitation? This tale of hidden desires, betrayal, and the fight for freedom will grip you with its twists, reminding us how love can bloom in the darkest places. Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. Welcome to a story set in the antebellum South, a time of stark contrasts between opulent mansions and brutal servitude. Our protagonist, Elijah, a strong yet gentle 22-year-old slave, dreams of liberty amid the chains of bondage. The master's wife, Eliza, trapped in a loveless marriage, harbors her own unspoken longings. As their paths cross in unexpected ways, tensions rise, secrets unravel, and a forbidden connection sparks. This narrative explores themes of power, passion, and peril, drawing from the harsh realities of history while weaving in dramatic romance and shocking revelations. "Come to my room tonight," said master's wife. The young slave man was afraid of what would follow. If you like this story, please subscribe and like my channel for more captivating true tales from history. This is a true story from my channel, inspired by real accounts from the 1800s plantations. It delves into the hidden lives of those ensnared in slavery, where unexpected alliances formed amid danger. We'll uncover how one young man's encounter with the master's wife led to a whirlwind of emotions, betrayals, and a quest for escape. Told like a passed-down family legend, it feels authentic and heart-wrenching. In the year 1845, on the sprawling Willow Creek Plantation in rural Georgia, the air hung heavy with the scent of blooming magnolias and the distant hum of field songs. Elijah Thompson, a young slave of 22, had been born into this world of endless labor. Tall and broad-shouldered from years of picking cotton under the overseer's watchful eye, he possessed a quiet intelligence that set him apart. His mother, long gone to the grave from fever, had taught him to read in secret by the flickering light of stolen candles. Elijah dreamed of freedom, whispering prayers under the stars, but reality chained him to the soil. The master, Mr. Harlan Whitaker, was a stern man in his 50s, whose wealth came from the backs of over 100 slaves. He ruled with an iron fist, his overseer, a cruel fellow named Grimes, enforcing every whim. But it was the master's wife, Eliza Whitaker, who added an air of mystery to the big house. At 35, she was a vision of southern grace, with porcelain skin, auburn hair pinned in elegant curls, and eyes like stormy seas. Married young to Harlan for his fortune, she found herself in a gilded cage, childless and isolated. Whispers among the house slaves spoke of her kindness, slipping extra food to the weary or turning a blind eye to minor infractions, but also of her profound loneliness, as Harlan spent nights away on business. Elijah's days blurred into one another. Dawn rises, backbreaking work in the fields, and evenings mending tools in the barn. One sweltering afternoon, as he delivered firewood to the main house, their worlds first brushed. Eliza stood on the veranda, fanning herself, her gaze lingering on him longer than usual. "Boy, fetch me some cool water from the spring," she commanded softly, her voice like silk. Elijah nodded, his heart skipping inexplicably. Little did he know, this simple errand was the thread that would weave their fates together, pulling him into a web of forbidden desires and dangerous secrets. As night fell that day, Eliza's invitation would change everything, igniting a spark that threatened to burn the plantation to the ground. The days following that first lingering glance stretched long and heavy, yet something invisible had shifted at Willow Creek Plantation. Elijah found himself assigned more often to tasks near the big house, carrying water barrels to the kitchen, splitting wood on the back porch, repairing the garden fence under the shade of live oaks. Each time, Eliza Whitaker seemed to appear, reading on the veranda, tending roses, or simply watching from an upstairs window. Her eyes, gray-green and restless, followed him with a quiet intensity that made his skin prickle. One humid evening in late summer, as thunder rumbled distant over the fields, Elijah was summoned inside to light the parlor lamps. The house slaves whispered warnings. "Mind yourself around Miss Eliza," but he obeyed. The parlor smelled of beeswax and lavender. Eliza sat alone by the open window, a book forgotten in her lap. When Elijah knelt to trim a wick, she spoke softly. "You read, don't you?" He froze, heart hammering. Reading was forbidden. Discovery meant the whip or worse. "I see it in your eyes," she continued, voice low. "The way you look at my bookshelves." Hunger for words. Elijah kept his gaze on the floor. "No, ma'am. I just do my work." She rose, silk skirts brushing the rug, and placed a small volume in his rough hands. "Robinson Crusoe. Take it tonight. Return it tomorrow. No one will know." That book became the first thread binding them. Night after night, Elijah slipped it back before dawn, only to receive another: poetry, history, even a worn Bible with margins full of her delicate handwriting. With each exchange came brief, whispered conversations in the shadowed hallway or behind the smokehouse. Eliza spoke of her girlhood in Virginia, of dances and dreams before marriage to Harlan turned her world cold. Elijah, cautious at first, began to share fragments of his own life. His mother's lullabies, the secret meetings where slaves sang of Moses and deliverance. Soon the exchanges grew bolder. On moonlit evenings, Eliza would send the house staff early to bed and summon Elijah under pretense of chores. They met in the unused music room, dust sheets over the piano, where she read aloud while he listened, spellbound. Her voice trembled when she spoke of freedom. His deepened when he described the North Star guiding runaways. A tenderness grew between them, fragile as new cotton bolls, stolen glances turning to lingering touches when she adjusted his collar or brushed dirt from his sleeve. But danger circled like hawks over the fields. Overseer Grimes noticed Elijah's frequent trips to the house and grumbled about uppity boys. Master Harlan, though often away selling cotton in Savannah, returned unexpectedly one week and eyed his wife's distracted mood with suspicion. Worst of all were the whispers among the quarters. Some slaves envied Elijah's favor, others feared the consequences if the master learned of midnight visits. One stormy night, rain lashing the windows, Eliza waited for him in the library. Candlelight gilded her face as she pressed the folded paper into his hand, a rough map showing rivers and safe houses northward, drawn from abolitionist pamphlets smuggled to her by a distant cousin. "If you ever choose to run," she whispered, tears shining, "this might help." Elijah's fingers closed over hers, the first time their skin met without pretense. In that moment, something deeper than gratitude stirred in his chest. Yet even as their bond deepened, Eliza's loneliness twisted into something more possessive. Late one evening, after Harlan had retired drunk and snoring, she found Elijah polishing silver in the pantry. The house was silent. She stepped close, too close, her breath warm against his ear. "Come to my room tonight," she murmured, voice trembling with a mix of fear and longing. "Just to talk. I cannot bear these walls alone any longer." Elijah's blood ran cold. He saw the desperation in her eyes, felt the pull of her sorrow, but he also saw the noose waiting if they were discovered. He stepped back, head bowed. "Miss Eliza, I can't. It ain't safe for either of us." Her face paled, then flushed with hurt. Silence stretched between them, thick as the storm outside. Finally she nodded once, turning away. But as Elijah retreated to the quarters, heart pounding, he knew the invitation had changed everything. The line between kindness and forbidden desire had been crossed, and there could be no stepping back. Little did he know that someone else had overheard those whispered words, someone whose jealousy burned hotter than any summer sun, and who would soon set events in motion that no map or prayer could undo. 1.8's fast. The storm that had threatened for days finally broke over Willow Creek Plantation in the first week of October 1845. Rain hammered the tin roof of the big house like 1,000 angry fists, and lightning lit the sky in jagged flashes. Elijah lay awake in the quarters, wrestling with the memory of Eliza's whispered invitation. He had refused her, but the refusal had not eased the ache in his chest, or the fear that coiled tighter each day. Unknown to him, Jealousy had taken root in another heart. Delilah, a house slave of 25 who had long carried a quiet affection for Elijah, had overheard Eliza's words in the pantry that night. Hurt and terrified for him, she confided in the wrong person, Overseer Grimes, hoping a warning might protect Elijah from ruin. But Grimes, who despised any slave shown favor, saw only opportunity. He carried the tale straight to Master Harlan Whitaker, twisting it into something far uglier than the truth. Harlan returned from Savannah earlier than expected, his face dark with drink and suspicion. That very evening, as thunder rolled, he summoned Elijah to the library. The room smelled of tobacco and wet wool. Harlan sat behind his massive oak desk, a horsewhip coiled beside him like a sleeping snake. "You've been spending time with my wife," Harlan said, voice low and dangerous. "Don't lie to me, boy. I know what's been going on." Elijah stood straight, hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. "I only do the chores Miss Eliza asks, sir." "Nothing more." Harlan rose slowly, circling him. "Chores in the middle of the night? Books passed in secret? You think I'm a fool?" He struck suddenly, the whip cracking across Elijah's shoulder. Pain exploded like fire, but Elijah bit down on any sound. Another lash followed, then another, until blood soaked his thin shirt. Upstairs, Eliza heard the blows. Her heart seized. She flew down the stairs in her nightgown, hair loose about her shoulders, and burst into the library. "Harlan, stop! You'll kill him." Harlan turned, eyes wild. "So the rumors are true. You defend him like a lover." "It isn't what you think," she cried, stepping between them. "I only tried to ease his suffering, to teach him letters, nothing more." But Harlan's rage had found its target. He seized Eliza by the arm, bruising her pale skin. "You shame me in my own house." Then to Elijah, "And you dare touch what's mine." In that moment, something snapped inside Elijah. Seeing Eliza's fear, the marks on her arm, he stepped forward. "Don't hurt her, sir. The fault is mine." The words sealed his fate. Harlan roared for Grimes. Two field hands dragged Elijah out into the pouring rain toward the whipping post in the yard. Eliza screamed, clawing at her husband, but he shoved her aside. She fell hard against the desk, striking her head. Dazed, she watched through the window as they stripped Elijah's shirt and bound him. Grimes laid the whip on with savage joy. 20 lashes, then 30. Elijah's back became a raw, bleeding ruin. Lightning illuminated his face each time the leather fell. He did not cry out once. Slaves gathered silently at the edges of the quarters, faces streaked with rain and tears. When it was over, they cut him down and left him in the mud. Eliza, recovering her strength, slipped past the distracted guards with a lantern and blanket. She knelt beside him in the downpour, sobbing. "Forgive me," she whispered, pressing the blanket to his wounds. "This is my doing." Elijah's voice was faint but steady. "No, Miss Eliza. I chose to come close, but I won't let this break me." As she helped him toward the shadows of the barn, a new sound cut through the storm, hoofbeats on the road. Lanterns bobbed in the distance. Patrol riders, summoned by Harlan, were coming to search for runaways or trouble. If they found Eliza with Elijah now, both would face far worse than whipping. In the flickering lightning, their eyes met. The moment of greatest danger had arrived, and with it, the stark realization. To survive, they would have to flee, together or not at all, into a night that offered no promises of mercy. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle by the time Eliza half-carried, half-dragged Elijah into the dim barn. Hay smelled sweet and damp around them as she eased him onto a pile of burlap sacks. His back was a nightmare of torn flesh, but his eyes remained clear, fixed on her with a mixture of pain and resolve. "We cannot stay here," he whispered hoarsely. "Patrollers will search every building." Eliza nodded, tears cutting tracks through the mud on her cheeks. She had already made her choice the moment she saw the whip fall. From a hidden pocket in her skirt, she drew a small leather pouch, coins saved over years, a gold locket with her mother's portrait, and the folded map she had given him weeks before. "I have a horse saddled in the far pasture," she said, voice steady now. "Old Bess won't be missed until morning." There's a quilt and food in the saddlebag. We can reach the Oconee River by dawn if we ride through the back trails. Elijah tried to rise, wincing. Miss Eliza, you can still go back. Tell them I forced you. They might believe. No. She pressed a gentle finger to his lips. I have lived a half-life in that house long enough. If I return now, Harlan will lock me away forever, or worse. My place is no longer there. Together they slipped through the shadows, avoiding the lantern lights of the patrollers who now combed the quarters. Eliza supported Elijah's weight as they crossed the wet fields to the pasture. Old Bess, a gentle mare, stood waiting under a dripping oak just as Eliza had arranged earlier that evening in secret hope. They mounted carefully, Elijah in front, Eliza behind, her arms around his waist to steady him. The ride through the night was slow and agonizing. Every jolt of the horse sent fire through Elijah's wounds, but he gritted his teeth and guided them along forgotten paths he knew from years of hauling wood. Eliza whispered encouragement, her cheek against his shoulder, the warmth of her body, the only comfort against the cold rain. By first light, they reached a dense swamp along the river's edge. An older slave named Amos, long trusted for carrying secret messages to runaways, waited in a hidden skiff. Eliza had sent word through a kitchen girl days earlier, preparing for the possibility of flight. Amos's eyes widened at the sight of the master's wife, but he said nothing, only helped Elijah aboard and pushed off into the gray mist. For 3 tense days they traveled by water and hidden trails, guided by Amos and others along an underground network Eliza's smuggled pamphlets had taught her about. Elijah's wounds began to fester despite Eliza's careful tending with clean cloth and willow bark tea. Fever set in, and there were nights he drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring his mother's name. On the 4th evening they reached a Quaker farmstead near the Georgia border. The family there, simple, kind people who risked everything for the cause, took them in. Eliza cut her hair short, traded her fine dress for homespun, and introduced herself as a widow fleeing a cruel husband. Elijah, too weak to protest, was carried to a clean bed where a doctor sympathetic to abolitionists cleaned and stitched his back. As the fever broke a week later, Elijah woke to find Eliza asleep in a chair beside him, her hand resting in his. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, and for the first time in his life he felt something like safety. Yet both knew the danger was far from over. Word would have spread, Harlan's pride would demand pursuit, and a white woman traveling with a black fugitive would draw every patroller south of Virginia. Still, in the quiet of that farmhouse, decisions were made. Elijah would continue north once he could travel, perhaps to Canada where the law could not touch him. Eliza, now branded a criminal in Southern eyes, chose to stay by his side, not as mistress and slave, but as partners in a new, uncertain life. As winter approached, they prepared to move again, hearts heavier with the knowledge that freedom came at a cost neither had fully imagined. Behind them lay Willow Creek in chaos, Harlan raging, Grimes dismissed for failing to prevent the escape, and whispers among the remaining slaves of a courage they had never dared dream possible. The immediate storm had passed, but the journey ahead stretched long and unforgiving. Winter settled over the northern countryside like a heavy quilt, muffling the world in snow and silence. The Quaker farmstead near the Pennsylvania border became a temporary haven for Elijah and Eliza through the hardest months of 1845 to 46. They lived under assumed names, Elijah as Eli Thompson, a free laborer recovering from injury, Eliza as Ellen Ward, a widow seeking a fresh start. The family who sheltered them asked few questions and offered quiet protection, sharing meals of cornmeal mush and apple preserves around a wide hearth. Elijah's body healed slowly, the deep gashes on his back scarred into raised, puckered lines, a permanent map of that terrible night. Some mornings he woke stiff and aching, but each day he grew stronger, chopping wood, mending fences, helping with the livestock. The work grounded him, gave purpose to hands that had once only known chains. Eliza, meanwhile, learned to knead bread, darn socks, and keep house without servants. She traded silk gowns for plain wool dresses and pinned her shortened hair beneath a simple bonnet. The transformation was more than outward. She began to carry herself differently, shoulders straighter, voice softer but surer. Their relationship deepened in the quiet spaces between chores. They spoke late into the night by the dying fire, sharing stories they had never dared tell before. Elijah spoke of his mother's courage, of the coded songs that carried hope across the fields. Eliza confessed her shame at having lived so long in comfort while others suffered. One snowy evening, as they sat shoulder to shoulder on the bench outside, watching the flakes drift, Elijah took her hand. "I never thought freedom would feel like this," he said. "Not just the leaving, but having someone walk beside me." Eliza squeezed his fingers. "I'm still learning what it means to be free, but I know I couldn't have done it without you." By spring 1846, travel became possible again. With help from the Underground Railroad network, they moved northward in stages, first to Philadelphia, where abolitionist friends arranged papers declaring Elijah a free man born in the North. Eliza's status was trickier. As a white woman who had harbored a fugitive, she lived under the constant shadow of pursuit. Yet she refused to leave him. They married quietly in a small meeting house, witnessed only by two Quaker elders. No grand ceremony, no fine dress, just vows spoken with trembling certainty. To stand together, come what may. They settled finally in a small town near Lake Ontario, close enough to Canada that the border felt like a promise rather than a threat. Elijah found work as a carpenter, his strong hands shaping beams and doors for new homes. Eliza opened a modest seamstress shop, sewing dresses and mending clothes for neighbors who never asked too many questions about her past. They bought a narrow clapboard house with a porch that faced west, toward the setting sun. Children came later, two daughters, born healthy and strong. The older one, named Hope, inherited her father's quiet intelligence and her mother's gray-green eyes. The younger, Grace, laughed easily and loved stories of stars guiding people to freedom. Elijah taught them to read by lamplight, just as his mother once had. Eliza taught them kindness and the courage to stand when others would look away. Word of Willow Creek reached them only in fragments over the years. Harlan Whitaker, humiliated by the scandal, sold much of the land and drank himself into an early grave. The plantation passed to distant cousins who cared little for its legacy. Some of the former slaves remembered Elijah and Eliza in hushed tones, proof that escape was possible, that kindness could cross the widest divides. Elijah and Eliza grew old together. Their hands, once separated by law and fear, now rested comfortably entwined. On quiet evenings they sat on that western porch, watching the sun dip below the lake, and spoke of the night they fled through rain and darkness. They never romanticized it. Too much blood and terror lay behind those memories, but they acknowledged the strange, stubborn love that had carried them through. In the end, they found not just freedom, but a life built together, fragile and hard-won, in a world that had once declared their bond impossible. Years passed like pages turning in a well-worn book, and the story of Elijah and Eliza faded into the quiet rhythm of a free life near Lake Ontario. Their little house on the hill, painted white with blue shutters, stood as a silent witness to mornings filled with the laughter of children and evenings warmed by the glow of a single lamp. Hope and Grace grew tall and strong, attending a small school where no child was turned away because of the color of their skin. They learned their father's steady patience and their mother's fierce gentleness, never fully grasping, until they were older, the price that had been paid for their ordinary days. Elijah lived to see the first cracks in the institution that had once owned him. In the spring of 1863, when news of the Emancipation Proclamation reached their town, he stood on the porch with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Eliza held his hand as church bells rang out across the water, and for the first time he allowed himself to believe that the chains were truly breaking, not just for him, but for millions still in bondage. He wrote letters southward through Quaker friends, searching for any word of old companions from Willow Creek, but most traces had scattered like cotton seed on the wind. Eliza outlived him by 7 years. Elijah passed peacefully in the winter of 1878, sitting in his rocking chair by the fire, a half-finished wooden toy horse in his lap for his youngest grandchild. The community buried him on a rise overlooking the lake, beneath a simple stone engraved with the words, He walked from darkness into light and carried others with him. After his death, Eliza kept the porch light burning every evening, a habit she said helped lost travelers find their way. She continued her seamstress work until her hands grew too stiff, then spent her days telling stories to the neighborhood children, tales of a brave young man who refused to cry out under the lash, and of a lonely woman who found courage in the most unexpected place. She never named the plantation or the people in her stories, but those who listened closely felt the weight of truth beneath the gentle telling. When Eliza joined Elijah in 1885, hope and grace laid her to rest beside him. On her stone they added a single line: "She chose love over fear, and freedom over comfort." Their descendants still live in that part of the country. Some became teachers, others carpenters, a few ministers and writers. Every generation, a child is told the family legend of the night a terrible storm hid two fugitives as they rode toward an uncertain dawn, of the forbidden kindness that grew into unbreakable love, and of the long road that finally led them home. The story is whispered around holiday tables and written in faded ink in family Bibles, a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, ordinary people could choose extraordinary courage. That love, though dangerous and forbidden, could sometimes light the path to liberty. And on quiet evenings, when the wind moves through the trees near the old graveyard on the hill, some say you can still hear the faint echo of two voices, one deep and steady, one soft and sure, speaking together across the years. We made it. We are free.